Now let's go to Richard Spoor now, onto this story about Diepsloot. Of course, we know police are patrolling in that area as tensions simmer over the number of illegal immigrants in the area. This week alone, a Zimbabwean was actually murdered. Actually, that happened yesterday. He was murdered by a mob. They decided to also burn him alive. Let's go to Richard Spoor. He's tweeted a bit about government playing the blame game. Thank you very much, Mr. Spoor, for speaking to us here on All Angles. Now, of course, a lot of people would agree with you. You believe that it's easier for the government to let the game, or rather the blame game between South Africans and foreign nationals continue because it exonerates them for a little bit.
Yes, I think populism and nationalism are big vote winners during very difficult times, and we are going through very difficult times. We've seen a massive rise in anti-immigrant activism from groups like Operation Dudula, the All Truck Drivers Federal Foundation, and various business forums. And we've also had the opportunity to assess a government's response to this. And it suggests to me that government is not all that adverse to riding this wave of anti-immigration sentiments. So, for example, while we do have a national action plan to combat racism and xenophobia, we've seen very little action on this score. It's been largely a case of people making pledges and giving assurances and polite debate, but very little action to actually address the scourge. We've also seen policy issues around the Southern African Free Trade area, which would promote free trade, free movement of goods and services, and of course the free movement of people. And we haven't seen any progress on that at all. But of late, we've also seen some actions by very senior government officials that give a strong indication that they're very sympathetic to this anti-immigrant attitudes and attitudes, and are pandering to it. For example, we've seen Thulas Nxesi's job quotas bill, which proposes to limit the number of foreigners that may be employed by businesses. We've seen the termination of 200,000 Zimbabwean citizens' visas in South Africa by Aaron Motsoaledi. And just yesterday, we had the Minister of Health spreading a story, which appears to be false, that one of the reasons that our maternity hospitals are in the difficulties they are, with women sleeping on floors when they arrive there to give birth, saying that 60% of the women giving birth in our hospitals are foreigners. Now, that is pandering. We've also seen movements at another level, at the level of the cities, where moves are afoot to enforce licensing for informal businessmen and informal traders. In effect, and there are demands, kind of, no foreigners may own spaza shops or run barbershops or food stalls, and there's an effort to drive them out. There have been numerous comments from the Minister of Police about the role of foreigners in crimes and drugs and urban decay, Hillbrow and the like. And it does seem very strongly that instead of confronting the problem of xenophobia and addressing the very severe risk that exists of violence. I mean, there's been a lot recently in Khayelitsha, Diepsloot, and many other areas. Instead of addressing that and speaking out strongly about it, we find this kind of pandering on the part of the politicians. So they're feeding into a narrative that says, look, the reason why there are no jobs and the reasons why you're struggling to establish your businesses is because of the foreigners. And we need to deal with this problem, and then your lives will be better. When in truth, our record of job creation and the environment we've created for small people to participate in the informal economy has our performance, the government's performance, has been abysmal. So I think this is a kind of a blaming game. We're blaming foreigners for our failures in many spheres. And I think with the elections coming up in 2 years' time, this is a good horse for government to ride. It's a good horse to win votes and support. And it may not be good for the country, and it may bode ill for thousands of many innocent people. But it is a worrying trend that we're seeing.
Absolutely. I'm interested to know your thoughts. You know, there's a colleague of mine who's covering Deep Sloot for us today, Puleli Chwiti Jones. He says he witnessed police doing what we found out years ago and we labeled inhumane, where police officers are allegedly pointing at particular body parts or part of the body and asking random people on the streets to identify what that body part would be called in a South African language.
Yeah, I suppose it's a quiz to interrogate them to see if they're local or foreign. But the violence that we've seen around xenophobic hatred is in no small part, the product of the police's inaction. I mean, if you see the attacks on foreign truck drivers, for one example, that's been going on for years without any effective action. If you see what's happening in Khayelitsha, where there's a minimum of effective policing and foreign people become extremely vulnerable. And I don't doubt for a moment that in Deep Sloot it's the same. And that, frankly, that the police are quite sympathetic and not all that keen, and certainly not well equipped to interfere and intervene and prevent the kind of violence that we've seen the last while.
But also, isn't it inhumane as well to just approach people who are walking in the streets and ask them to give you any identification? So that means if you're going to approach me, you've already decided that I'm here illegally or that I'm a foreign national. That surely is inhumane.
Well, it's inhumane, it's unlawful, it's discriminatory, but I encounter it all the time. I see how foreign people are treated differently by the police and treated differently by the courts. And are being significantly discriminated against. It's not a racial discrimination, but it certainly is an anti-foreigner discrimination, which comes very, very close.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Spoor, for your time here. I think Deep Sloot is basically something that is just, showing South Africans exactly what it is that we've always had a problem with, and now it's spilling out for the entire world to see, unfortunately. Let's take